This is the Emotional Horsemanship podcast. I am Lockie Phillips, your host. Emotional Horsemanship coaches deeply caring horse people to train emotionally balanced horses with science, empathy, and feel. And this is the podcast dedicated to exploring all of that within. We try to innovate horse training that puts the horse first. Season 2 of this podcast brings us solo episodes, special guests, and small groups of guests as we discuss horses, horse training, the equestrian industry, and the big, beautiful ideas that horses inspire in us always. A little bit of a shift podcast today is Charlotte Moore of CM Training. Charlotte Moore is based in Perth, Western Australia, and has a really interesting background coming into horses from the medical field. She spent 10 years studying towards becoming a doctor, which included working in the emergency medical response field, so within ambulances, and she also worked within pathology and laboratory medicine, molecular genetics, cancer research, and biomedical science. After many years there, she also moved into her new passion for brain and neurology and the behavior that comes out of our understanding of neurology. So all of this led into what she really calls her passionate calling, which is CM training, Charlotte Moore training. She's always been a horse person and decided to bring everything she was learning in the medical and science sector and in the neuroscience sector to horses. Speaking with Charlotte felt like speaking to a bot who is inside my head. And though I have no medical degree or background in science like she does, I am a voracious nerd. And it was so fun for me to be able to nerd out with her on someone who understood everything that I understood as well, and then even more so. So I hope you enjoy this episode. I have the feeling that Charlotte Moore will be back for more. Thanks, Charlotte, and I hope you love her as much as I did. I'm sitting here with Charlotte Moore, neuroscientist and horsewoman. How are you today, Charlotte?
I'm wonderful, Lockie. How are you?
Good. I'm very, very excited to get to know you more. I came across your social media because a few horse people were sharing your posts. And when I looked at your posts, not only are they extremely professional and well put together, but it was the single first time I'm seeing another horse voice, horse adjacent, horse related voice, speaking to some of the neuroscience that I had been reading up on and looking into myself. And I thought, is this person a bot? Is she in my head? Like, what's going on? So I had to reach out to you and extend an invitation to speak to you. And so first thing I have to say is thank you.
Oh, thank you. I'm incredibly excited to be part of this entire process, to be part of your show and to be part of everything that you're putting out to the horse industry. I'm very excited, really excited. It's a pretty new industry. It's pretty new to expose to the industry. So this is really exciting.
Beautiful. Thank you. Well, my first question I ask everybody is a big one, and the point is just to hear you speak. Charlotte, who are you? What do you do? And how do you do it?
Ooh, I'm going to try and squeeze this one in time as I can about it. So I am a neuroscientist. My subspecialty is clinical neuroscience and translational neuroscience. So what that means is traditionally neuroscientists are about being in the lab and doing all the research, etc. But there needs to be sort of someone out there that sort of takes that research and puts it into a model or something that's applicable in a larger sense, and is able to translate that into something that can be used somewhere in the big wide world, some way, somehow.
Amen.
Yeah, And there aren't very many of us sort of out there at the moment. The psychologists tend to be the people who sort of try and take the science from as much as they can from the neuroscience and then sort of translate it as much as they can. But they are two different fields. So, you have to be fairly unique in the area of, I suppose, cognitive neuroscience, where you blend the two worlds together. But to have a neuroscientist sort of being clinical, like a pure neuroscientist being clinical, is not a common thing because, like I said, most of us are in the lab. But I have a very heavy clinical background. So I thought, why not start something new? And I just happened to also be into horses, and I have for a very, very, very long time. And they're an incredible teacher. And to be very bluntly honest with you, my journey through learning neuroscience has been enhanced tenfold because of horses giving the most honest answers and feedback to the primal brain, to the mammal brain. And so where we have questions of it being around the humans, we're now sort of going, it's not actually the human necessarily, it's the mammal brain that's quite identical across all mammal species. And where we were once under the impression that that wasn't actually the case, that, primates had a very different brain to, say, horses, we now know that's not the case. We now know that, well, even birds, rats have prefrontal cortexes, and, it was not, I think I get almost message this privately on a daily basis almost to tell me that horses don't have a prefrontal cortex.
Rubbish.
And
Rubbish.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. When we in the lab are sort of testing the prefrontal cortex of a rat, so it kind of doesn't make sense that, hey, if a rat and a bird have a prefrontal cortex but a horse doesn't, something's kind of, amiss there. So I think that myth has been busted.
Super.
So it's lovely to sort of advocate. It's lovely to advocate for the horse brain and go across species. And we can do that as neuroscientists purely because the mammal brain is actually quite identical in its what's within the brain itself is identical. Things might look different in terms of size because of, maybe, like, for example, the cerebellum, which is the sort of the back portion of the brain at the back on a horse, is quite large compared to the human in proportion to the rest of the brain. That's because they use their body, in terms of balance, movement, and coordination.
Right.
They have 4 legs, we have 2. So it makes sense that structure and function play an important role in what you see in the end result of adaptation of the brain.
And the cerebellum mediates movement and the memory and the coordination of movement and proprioception. Am I correct in saying that?
There's a lot actually not known about the cerebellum at the moment, but we are in the process of studying that. It does, typically in textbooks, you will see that it does a lot of the coordination of movement. It does a lot of the balance tone.
Balance tone.
Balance and tone. It's the separate part of the brain. I don't have my brain with me, but I can get it and show you exactly what it is. It's not a real brain, obviously. So yeah, I can show you what that is. But that's typically what the textbooks would say. Yeah, but we're also aware now that that part of the brain it has so many specialized, intricate, clever functions that actually help to sort of communicate with the entire brain. And we're just at the beginning of learning what that sort of does.
Wow.
So incredible.
Wow.
And that's just that part of the brain. Yeah.
Wow. So how do you deliver your work? You said something clinical, and describe for people who don't know the difference between a clinical neuroscientist and a neuroscientist.
So the main clinical meaning, applying it in a clinical setting. So traditionally speaking, what I actually do is I my subspecialty, my niche area is neuroendocrinology. So I look at how particularly
So exciting. I'm trying not to get too excited because I love that subject. Okay, continue. Yeah.
Yay. I love that you love that.
Oh.
So great when you meet someone who's just in alignment with exactly where you're at.
I'm just a nerd. I'm not a
I love
neuroscientist.
it.
I'm a nerd. There's a difference.
You don't need to be.
Right.
You don't need to be.
Yeah.
Yeah. All you have is an openness and a willingness to learn and watch the stuff come on in.
That's right. That's right.
I basically look at how the brain responds to the stress response cortisol and how cortisol mediates pretty much all other brain function. And I say mediates because we're under the impression that that the brain is kind of that. Most people have sort of heard about dopamine nowadays. Everyone seems to be on a bit of the dopamine train. In neuroscience, it's kind of glutamate, which is the main excitatory neurotransmitter. I encourage people to Google that if you don't know what that is. But really what kind of determines whether or not that is something that works or is sensitive is, what part of the brain is receptive to that is very much mediated by the stress response cortisol. And so this means that particularly as a mammal, and even more particularly as a social mammal, what we now have is a great indication that emotions are first and foremost the main mediator of behavior, really. Emotions are. How you feel needs to get processed before what you do around that. And really, the only two ways that's going to happen is either unconsciously or consciously. You're either aware of it or you're not aware of it. And if you're a trainer or someone who's, facilitating that brain to learn something new, if you are not taking care of the process of looking at how that horse feels in response to the information, then you are at risk of changing how that animal processes their neural pathways in response to learning, in response to you as the team leader, all of these things, the neuroplasticity, which is just the ability for the nerves to basically make new connections. So everything's kind of mediated or controlled through that stress response hormone. And the reason for that is cortisol is, in its traditional sense, what most people know cortisol as a stress response hormone. It's generally released in response to a stressor of some kind. So when the brain perceives threat of any kind, it then sends signals to multiple parts of the brains down to the little adrenal glands, the little hats on top of the kidneys. They release cortisol, and that cortisol goes back into the bloodstream, up to the brain, and then says, hey, we have a problem. I need this part of the brain to work, this part of the brain to shut down, react, run, survive, do this, do that. And I think there's two reasons that the consensus around horses not having a prefrontal cortex has stemmed from two things. One, the architecture of a primate brain versus other mammals does look a little bit different in terms of layering, but the function is still the same. So we're not putting so much emphasis on the architecture anymore because the function is still the same. But mainly because I think people are just not seeing horses activate things like problem solving, reasoning, risk assessment, forward planning, and having an expectation that they're going to do it at the same extent as a human it's just unfair. But that's what's happening. We can't expect any brain, even ourselves, if we're frightened, that part of the brain, this part, the prefrontal cortex, starts to go offline. And that's because of cortisol. Cortisol gets higher, and the pathways that connect the emotional part of the brain deep in the center to the prefrontal cortex, they start to basically shut down those pathways. And one by one, what you're left with is the weakest connections sort of get dropped off first, and you're left with the strongest connections. So the highly established things that the brain knows stays, but the things that are newly developed, maybe you just learnt a language yesterday, or your horse just walked over the tarp for the first time yesterday, those things will go offline first. And we're kind of left with basically the expectation of patterns and habits and what I call emotional solutions that have been made to help alleviate the pressures of that stress or that particular emotion. So, it's a very complex but very juicy topic.
I love it.
And
the emotional horsemanship idea for me, and the thing that a lot of people misunderstand about my work is I think emotional horsemanship is about therapizing the horse person, and that's not the case at all. It's emotional horsemanship with a side effect of how the human feels and the human being aware of themselves. But that's like a pre-flight check-in, Have you packed these bags yourself? Do you know which plane you're getting on? That's as far as I'll take it with people, because the emotional component in emotional horsemanship was, and always will be about how the horse feels, and not having how the horse feels as like a special Tuesday discussion, once a week, or a webinar in August, behavior, 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 emotion, behavior, 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 feel, behavior, which is how the industry typically looks at it. Instead of focusing on horsemanship in that way, putting emotion first, I believe, puts the horse before the cart and allows us to really see what's going on. And I so agree with you that you've got to take out fear of you, of the training, of the handling completely. You can't have it even there a little bit, which is why I've got such a hard ass line on things such as sticks, such as spurs, such as any symbol for that horse, which could symbolize fear at any moment in their life, even if you have never hurt them with it, even if your intentions are good, even if the horse appears calm and relaxed right now. If you're holding something that used to hurt them, fear could potentially be present now at a small level or at any moment. And if you do that, the horses become less clever.
Correct.
And when they're less clever, they are more dangerous. And when they are more
100%.
dangerous and less clever, you are likely to fall into habits of using more violence, more pressure, more force to stay safe yourself. And so this is the hill I'm going to die on. And it's hugely validating to hear this from a clinical neuroscientist who's also a horse person, that, yes, this is correct. Yes, this is correct. But I'd like to talk a little bit more about cortisol, if you'll go there with me.
Oh my gosh, yes, all day, every day.
Okay, so I'm assuming you know Dr. Lisa Feldman Barrett at the Effective Science Institute in Boston. Lisa Feldman Barrett. She's a Jewish neuroscientist and psychologist, I believe. She had a background in psychology and then she moved into neuroscience. She's been looking into the constructive model of emotion, that emotions are constructed, not triggered, that they are predicted, not triggered. And she has, a few fire points that get her fired up. And I think she also intentionally makes pushback type statements on certain tropes in neuroscience just to shake people up, ruffle feathers, and get people thinking differently. I don't necessarily think it's a fully rounded representation of how she thinks, but I think that she deliberately kind of spins it with a bit of heat to to bring people's awareness to it. For example, she challenges Bessel van der Kolk's work on the body holds the score and says that the body doesn't hold the score, the brain holds the score, the body holds the scorecard. So she'll say things like that to shake people up, you know. And one of the things that she says is that cortisol is not a stress hormone. What? When I first heard that, I went, what? She said it's not a stress hormone. It's a metabolic regulator designed to facilitate difficult tasks, whatever that difficult task is, be that a threat to your person, be that a traumatic event, or be that getting up off the sofa if you're feeling really inclined to stay there. That can feel really difficult. You require cortisol to not pass out when you stand up after lying down. Cortisol's kind of present all the time. And this trope that cortisol is a stress hormone, ... stress hormone equals bad hormone, ... stress hormone equals unethical hormone, ... stress present in horse training is unethical, period, is a trope that I deal with as a modern leaning horse trainer in the circles I run in, where people become totally allergic to seeing their horse try anything difficult at all. And that's really, really problematic. And that's where we will stumble as horse training innovators. We stumble on that block. And if we can't get past it, we will never close the gap between what we're doing and what our traditional counterparts are doing. Because our traditional counterparts know horses can apply themselves to difficult things. And that sort of invigorates them with a level of insert word here, stress, tension, effort, energy, whatever the word is, and that the horse can actually enjoy the outcome of that. So would you like to just extemporaneously chew with me on cortisol a little bit more deeply?
Yes.
Okay.
I would love to. I would absolutely love to. I have created a model to sort of try and simplify exactly what you just said.
Okay.
Because that became incredibly apparent to me very early on when I started to sort of expand on this. And you will see this left, right, and center that cortisol is a negative hormone. Without it, we die. It's as simple as that.
Without cortisol, we die. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay.
100%.
Okay.
Yep.
Wow.
Everything. Without it, we die. We have to. It's the thing that wakes us up in the morning. That's why we get we have two spikes throughout the day. The one that rouses us up in the morning is very much linked to the circadian rhythm. So as the sun starts to rise, that's when we get our first spike of cortisol. Incidentally, because cortisol is, one of its jobs is to increase the heart rate. And I'm not talking from a brain perspective. I'm talking from a body perspective right now. So if I could split the two in half and just talk about the body for a second, what you would see physiologically with cortisol are things like
body temperature.
Yep, correct. Increased respiratory rate. And these would just be at moderate levels, be it increased metabolic rate, all of those things.
Gut motility.
Gut. Yeah, absolutely. And obviously all those things are essential to get, cellular respiration happening and metabolic function going on. So that makes sense. But, when we start to talk about higher levels of cortisol, there seems to be no delineation between what sort of happens between, the basal levels of cortisol,
like the
versus
background
the
hum.
elevated.
So the background hum always present, sort of cortisol humming around in the background, like a dopamine baseline also can be buzzing around. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So really, cortisol is one of these incredibly special hormones that, because people sort of very much know it as something that suppresses the immune system, we get given cortisone shots, which is a synthetic version of it to help with inflammation, and they're steroid-based anti-inflammatories, right? And horses get a lot of these.
So cortisone injections is a synthetic cortisol. Yes. And cortisol is an anti-inflammatory? Or synthetic? Yes. Wow, okay.
And it does this. it has anti-inflammatory properties because it's a special family of hormones. It's a steroid hormone. And this steroid hormone has the capacity to enter the cell's nucleus and tap into the DNA and basically switch genes on and off.
Wow.
And this is what allows it to turn immune responses on and off. So when you're in freeze, flight, fight mode, you don't need essentially an immune response going on. So it will go, hey, we don't need that going on. Let's turn off your immune system. Let's shut it down for a little bit.
Save energy to put all capacities into survival.
Survival. Correct. Right. Correct. So when we're sort of willy-nilly giving this as a synthetic, whether it be topical, injectable, whatever, that we're really affecting the entire system and the axes that it relies on to exert all its benefits as well. And it disrupts those systems, and every cell relies on cortisol feedback, cortisol input and influence. So going up to the brain, this is where it starts to get a little bit different because very few things can kind of cross the blood-brain barrier. Cortisol is obviously one of those things. Cortisol has we have a lot of very clever little receptors in our brain that are strategically placed throughout the brain. This is across the board through all mammal brains. I'm going to get my nerd on a little bit. I'm going to pull you down into the nerd, like pretty neuroscience-y now.
Do it. I'll tell you when the fog index gets too thick for me and I need clarification. If I'm saying silent, it means I'm still with you.
Great. Awesome. So cortisol, think of cortisol as a ball, right? And for this ball to have an effect, it needs to have something it can latch to. And I often refer to that as a cup, right? In its traditional sense, we're talking about cortisol, the substance, the hormone, and its receptor. The receptor is the thing. Without the receptor, that ball has no chance of having any effect. You have to have the receptor there for it to exert any effect. This is why humans can't smell an array of things that horses can smell because they don't have the receptors specifically for those smells in the environment that horses can smell cortisol. It's the same with dogs. Humans can't. This means we're just limited to seeing the visual effects of cortisol, but not necessarily being able to use the olfactory senses to enhance that information coming downrange. Whilst when you watch horses go to shows, they'll sit there, they'll look, and you see them smell their flair, and they'll smell, and they're just smelling information like threat is part of their survival mechanism, and they have those olfactory receptors in their repertoire. They do have that. Same with dogs. That's why dogs know where to smell the perpetrators when they're chasing after a bad guy or bad woman or whatever. So they're smelling that in the air. Humans don't have this in our repertoire because we have other senses that we can kind of tap into. But going back to these receptors, why this is so cool is because cortisol actually has binds to two different type of receptors. One is called a mineralocorticoid, so I'm going to shorten that to MR, and the other one is a glucocorticoid, and I'm going to shorten that to GR. So we've got it gets drawn to MRs and GRs. Now, this is where it becomes really interesting because cortisol, even though you would naturally think that glucocorticoids would be drawn more to, say, its matching card glucocorticoid receptor, it's actually not. It actually has a higher affinity, meaning a higher drawing to MRs. It's not until the MRs are saturated that then it starts to overflow into the GRs. These are distributed differently throughout the brain. So where they are placed throughout the brain means, for example, let's talk about the emotional center of the brain, the limbic system. I often refer to that as the primal brain because that's where you're going to get all your survival behaviors from, right? And emotions are produced there. Your freeze, flight, fight are produced there. Food motivation, procreation motivation. So all of those things, they all kind of live there. So MRs live there densely because we've got the memory part of the brain there as well. And we've got the fear centers and the emotional centers there. But we've also got a lot in the prefrontal cortex as well. And what happens is as long as those cortisol levels are not saturating those MRs, we're actually building these incredible neural networks between upstairs where all the higher processing happenings like the forward planning, the problem solving, and all of those things, which horses absolutely can do. We've seen evidence of it time and time and time again. And its relationship with the emotions. Provided those MRs are not saturated, you are going to get those two brains to work so synergistically and you will get the best out of that brain. This means the outcome of these two brains working together, these two areas, not two separate brains, but these two separate areas working together, the outcome is discomfort. It's not comfort, and it's certainly not distress. It's discomfort. Cortisol at higher levels induces distress. And what happens in distress is those pathways that connect downstairs to upstairs shut down. And now all we're left with is downstairs operations, so survival-based behaviors. And that's what most people are used to seeing. And then that obviously induces survival mode in them, and the cycle continues. So I created a model around that called the CUD, comfortable, uncomfortable, and distressed. And it's basically helping people to understand within themselves and within horses that discomfort is not only something that shouldn't be feared, it should be fell in love with. You need to learn to value it.
Thank you. This is a hill I'm going to die on. This is enormously.
I'm with you there, friend.
I cannot tell you how validating this is for me because if you don't know me very well enough yet, you'll get to know that I have a particular penchant for making other people uncomfortable.
Yay! Me too. Well done.
It seems to be my quote unquote brand is invigorating discomfort in others.
Yeah.
I don't pathologize discomfort. I wake up in the morning, I'm uncomfortable. I wake up in the morning, I'm uncomfortable because I'm living in a country where I don't speak the language and I'm doing difficult things with my life, very difficult things with my life. And so I love all of that. And I lean into all of that because that's where the good stuff is. And I can't do too much of it because, of course, as you said, the cortisol receptors in the brain overflow into my prefrontal cortex and the prefrontal cortex shuts down and then I'm left with basal responses only. So what you're actually describing is the neuroendocrinology of the threshold phenomenon that we talk about over and over and over again, about nervous system thresholds. I describe it with colors: green zone, orange zone, red zone, black zone, right? And a lot of people think the red zone is a black zone. It's not. Red zone is something you kind of want to avoid because you're right on the cusp of going into the black.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, your limbic system is really reaching max capacity of how much cortisol it can actually deal with. It means you're laying down max number of networks at the double. It's just like huge amounts of networks are laying down, laying down, laying down. It's like the construction of the brain is getting built up. It's like a plant in the wind. The more wind that young plant gets, the more that plant produces a hormone to grow strong roots. You know, it's like it actually strengthens the brain. It's like lifting weights. That's the
Yes.
other analogy. It's taking the brain to the gym, you place it under a load, and that load until you reach max capacity. And then if you go past it, you get catastrophic failure and tear. But the discomfort of lifting the weight is not a bad thing. Our addiction to comfort is making us miserable. And so many people are so beholden to this idea that they need to sit on this comfortable, regulated perch all the time. And anything that takes them off that is somehow bad. And I get a lot of shit. At one point, there were death threats for making other people uncomfortable about what they held to be a comfortable truth. But all I was trying to do is get to people the place where they could actually facilitate life. Life. Neuroplasticity, learning. And I mean, when I had a group coaching program last year with 100 and some people in it, and in it, my primary focus was getting them uncomfortable. It was my primary focus. And it was deeply counterintuitive for a lot of them. Not everyone. Deeply counterintuitive and deeply uncomfortable for all of us, including myself. But did we learn something? You bet we learned something. Not a single person didn't learn something, And there's a time and a place to stop that and for everyone to take a breath, if you're going over threshold. Like when I do clinics, the first thing I do at the clinics is when we have all the horses in the room, because we do it in a group, the horses walk into the room, their owners are usually stressed out, the auditors are usually stressed out, and the horses are walking around smelling all that cortisol in the air. And so the first thing I do is a guided meditation with the whole group to bring all of that right down. And what happens is that the horses literally settle because the cortisol, the perfume of cortisol leaves the room. And now we can actually talk to the horses. And it's essential that we do that all together because horses are such community-driven animals. It's so much easier to do it in a group, including with a group of auditors. If there's not many people in the room and not many horses in the room or no other horse in the room, that's really hard for a horse to get enough signals to know that they're safe or not, right? Because they'll smell and they're just like, I just smell like the wooden panels on the wall. Should I be? I'm left to my own devices here. But if there's a whole group of people who are taking the cortisols down to a manageable level, the horses sense from the entire community that all is well and that they can actually, discover things here. I mean, it's so validating to hear you describe it in that kind of detail. So validating.
I'm so glad. I'm so glad that helps you. I completely understand how hard it is to share this with people because it does create so much inner conflict. It really does. We're in a world where everybody is very much pushed to comfort. And realistically, the brain isn't designed to live the way we live as humans, as horses, as dogs. I don't know about giraffes, but, I don't know anyone who owns giraffes. But when you are in a constant state of arousal, like those mammals that I've just mentioned, horses, dogs, people, and they're primarily the ones that I deal with, the brain is getting input constantly. Cortisol is in constant production, and it's not, so we're not talking about whether or not cortisol is good or bad. Cortisol is essential. There's no opinion on this. It's not good, it's not bad. It's the thing that keeps you alive and it keeps you survive. It allows you to stay alive and survive. So it works on all levels, right the way from helping you, like being low enough that you can sleep, being right the way through to keep you alive, keep your heart going. It's not adrenaline, it's cortisol. Use this as an analogy all the time. I can't remember where I heard it from. I think it might be Robert Sapolsky, the neuroscientist, but I loved it when I first heard it. So it's so relevant. Adrenaline is the thing that takes the plane into the sky. It's the fuel that takes the plane into the sky. Cortisol is the fuel that flies it. It keeps it up there. And that's what sustains that state. Now, we can abuse that with that arousal state all the time. So it's not a case of it's not a case of we need to watch the states that we're in, low, medium, or high, basically. It's not a case of good or bad. It's a case of how much and for how long. It is so important to go medium level. Like you, I have a color system. I have a 3-state system: low, medium, or high, comfortable, uncomfortable, distressed, and that's green, orange, and red. And the first threshold is between the C and the U, comfortable and uncomfortable. And in my model, that's a perforated line. It's a threshold that has to be crossed if you want growth. And I make a promise to actually induce that with whoever I'm working with, just like you do.
Perfect.
And I will make that really clear. I will cause you to be uncomfortable. I will challenge you. The second threshold, T2, is the one that lays between uncomfortable and distress. That's a solid line. And I make a promise that
not to go past it.
And I will protect you from anything that causes you to go like in the environment. It's my job to make sure if I'm working with a horse or even as a human, my job is to make sure that I facilitate the right stimulus in the environment that doesn't cross that threshold for you. I can't control the environment. The only thing I can do is be aware of your cud. I call it the cud, your cud. And basically, if I'm not aware of that, how can I help support you in that? I can't. I have to be aware of your states for that to happen. And those states represent your cortisol levels. I want you in uncomfortable. And I want you to know that when you're in discomfort, I also will show you the skills in how to sit in it. I'm not just going to leave you in it. So what that looks like for humans is when you're in discomfort, the quickest way to help you feel okay about that is to help you identify the emotion itself. And that's the quickest way to neutralize the intensity. And we're not necessarily talking about the type of emotion. We're talking about the emotional intensity. That's what matters. You can be happy and so happy that it flips you over into the distress state.
Distressingly happy. Yes.
Yeah, you can. Have you ever seen, and you see this in dogs more than you do horses, but have you ever seen a dog be so happy that it flips into aggression?
Yeah. Nothing
That's a
thinner,
great example of
nothing thinner than a knife's edge separates play and joy from rage.
Correct. Yeah, correct. That is a really great example of that T2, that threshold 2 being crossed, purely because we're talking about cortisol intensity has just been escalated despite the type of emotion.
Right.
Cortisol is being elevated because basically where cortisol is concerned, if you start looking at the physiology behind cortisol, speed is one of those things. Where there's speed, there's higher cortisol. Certain postures reflect higher cortisol levels. That's why I always teach people the higher the pole, the higher the cortisol. Look for the pole. It's literally a stressor meter.
Yes.
The pole is a stressor meter. And what people believe to be normal is not actually natural. Meaning when you look at wild horses who do have the normal cortisol fluctuation between comfort and discomfort, then that's the fluctuation we need to be looking at. It's a pendulum, comfort to discomfort, comfort to discomfort. You don't stay in discomfort and you don't stay in comfort. You pendulum between the two to get growth and resilience. And that's where cortisol gets to exert its incredible neuroplastic abilities only then. Because now we're working in the MR zone, completely in the MR zone. When the minute we cross T2 is the minute we start to go into GR zone. And they are located, those receptors are located in the primal brain predominantly. And so free, flight, fight, that's what you're going to get. And so you need to be looking for that pole because that physiologically is your main indicator in a horse, particularly in a domesticated horse, but equally in a wild horse. When you look at the differences in a domesticated horse's posture versus a wild, they look completely different. And look at the feed they're on. wild don't have any of the variation that we give them domestic. We think and it's not, I'm not even going to get into that so much, but what I want to sort of kind of highlight here is it's not the protein powders that we put in our horse's feed to build the top line. It's the posture, and it's the cortisol that mediates the posture. We need to take care of the cortisol, and to bring that basal level down, the systemic effect that will have metabolically, gastrointestinally, acidity level, everything, mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually, connectivity-wise, everything. It harmonizes everything when you have appropriate medium levels that are allowed to fluctuate between low and medium levels of cortisol. That's where the magic truly begins.
Let's take a break. If you're enjoying this podcast, then you're very likely going to absolutely love at least one of my online courses that I have available for sign up at any time for anybody. And the course I'd like to invite you to join is called the Emotional Horsemanship Foundation online course. I know that's a bit of a mouthful, but let me break it down for you. The foundations of emotional horsemanship are taught there in simple, easy English. You will learn the foundation principles of this horse training method, and when I say method, that does not mean dogma, plus powerful self-awareness exercises. Then, carefully and deliberately, with theory and practical tutorials, you will be taught mare-foal bonding, or MFB, which is the essential foundation technique of emotional horsemanship, of how I train horses. MFB is a little bit like the alphabet of emotional horsemanship, and all subsequent techniques that we work on spring from it. The course includes downloadable PDF study guides, training journals, and is hosted on a mobile-compatible platform so your learning potential is maximized. And I'm thrilled to tell you, in the very near future, we will have an app for even better mobile study. This course has over 700 students in it, students representing 51 countries and who speak 16 different native languages. On its original platform, it still holds a 4.9 out of 5-star rating on average. It gives you 4 hours and 18 minutes of video tutorials, 18 tutorials, both theory and practical, 6 tests, downloadable PDF booklets, more than 40 downloadable visual slides, and a professional learning platform. Everything is in plain, simple, clear, and easy to understand English, and transcriptions are available if English is your second language. Some of our students said that this course leads straight to the opening of a heart. Some of our students also said that they're thoroughly enjoying this course. Some of our students also said that the course was easy to follow and it felt priceless. Quote, exactly how I've always felt and intuitively got to know my horses. Understanding the actual reasoning for this is priceless, said one student. If you'd like to join me, I'd like to invite you to sign up via the link in the show notes, or you can go to emotionalhorsemanship.com, click on the online courses tab, and follow the prompts to the Emotional Horsemanship Foundation online course. Now, with that, let's return to my guest, Charlotte Moore, who is basically blowing me away with her knowledge.
Truly begins. If you allow your horse to just go, that's uncomfortable for me, no, I'm going over here. That's not a horse feeling the need to move. That's a horse going, I'm uncomfortable with that. So, and I don't want to feel uncomfortable. And if you allow that brain to use that as a solution, you're essentially facilitating comfort. So what I always sort of teach my clients is be aware that they have those emotional solutions. Say, thank you. Can I switch your emotional solution out for mine, which is let's just sit in it for a second. And when we sit in it, let's just sit in that with neutral alignment. And what I mean by that is pole is at the same height as the wither. And we're going to replicate the postural We're going to reverse engineer this process, and we're going to replicate the posture that comes with natural, healthy basal cortisol levels, not what's deemed as not like natural, not normal. Domesticated horses sleep nowadays like that. That's not normal. Normal becomes a part of an adaptation to survive. It doesn't necessarily equal natural. And we want to make sure that there's distinction between the two there so that we can realign them. Let's bring natural and normal together again and allow posture and biomechanics to assist with telling the brain, it's okay, alarm systems can come down now. Let's actually do that, create that posture, and then allow that brain to go back online to then actually properly problem solve and assess the true threat, not the perceived anticipation of the threat. They're so busy trying to avoid it, and we're so busy trying to entertain that and focus on, can you just make that plastic bag? Can you just, they were fine walking past there yesterday. I don't know what their problem is. It's not about that. You can't change that. You can only support that brain in that exact moment in response to how they're perceiving it, which is, if you're not aware that brain is in discomfort, and then have a skill set to say, I'm going to switch your solutions out for my solutions, which is we're just going to stop for a second. We're going to breathe, and we're going to go into neutral alignment. And I want you to actually look at the truth around you and gain some information. Let your senses tell the truth, not your brain try and tell you that there's something else going on there.
Fairy tales.
It's not teleporting.
So,
yeah,
Charlotte, you're based in Perth, Australia. In about a month, 5 weeks, I'll be delivering a clinic in Perth, Australia. You have to be there. I'm sorry.
I will be.
You have to clear your schedule. I have to have you there.
I will.
If I can't get you for the actual clinic, then I need to meet with you around horses prior or after the clinic. It really has to happen because this is my wheelhouse. This is the place I live, and it can be a lonely place at times. But so okay, let me just share with you where I'm at on this, because I'm on the same page with you with a slightly different lens as well. So mammalian care and nurturance and oxytocin creates the foundation of all proper social connections that are without violence and without fear, right? Without that oxytocin connection between you and another mammal, all social relationships can't occur next. And when I say social, it means you are aware of the individual, who the individual is, what they mean to you, and what you might mean to them. And as mammals, we are hardwired for social connectivity, horses even more so. And so I've got to start with that nurturant piece, because that is the place we return to. It's the place we de-escalate to if things get out of hand. If we've got that established, then you're starting to lay down a buffer zone that you can always return to if things get out of hand. It's really important you've got that first. Once you've got that, you start to add challenge to the horse, but you're adding challenge in increments that allow you to observe in real time if they are succeeding in laying down neural pathways as they're going. Are they actually tolerating and holding in their physiological, emotional container the thing that you're offering them? Are they actually really holding that? And it's very important we do that without leverage devices or things that kind of shuffle or rush them through stuff, because if you rush them through stuff, make them go forwards faster than they would naturally go without a stick, let's say, you will sometimes skip steps and sometimes tip over the threshold or disbalance the container, or you won't really be able to see or watch the horse actually lay down these connections in real time. So once you're laying down these connections, you're kind of building this solid root system. And even then, you need to be able to dip back into that place of care every now and then. And there are specific postures and behaviors that I tap into with horses to facilitate that. And then when you're riding this horse, it's horizontal posture first, really horizontal posture first. Not only are you accessing the nuchal ligament leverage, which is going to lift the spine without much muscular effort on behalf of the horse, which is the first step of lifting the back. It's the first step, not the end step. But you're also, again, laying down that root system, that sustainable discomfort tolerance, challenge tolerance, work ethic, you could say, or the ability of the horse to co-sign effortful behaviors with you in a way that feels honoring to them and also facilitates their ability to communicate with you in real time. Once you've laid down that structure, then you start playing with the pole above the withers. What I'm really talking about is dressage. Wake up, everyone. Lockie's talking about dressage because dressage is actually originally designed with all of this in mind. It's just not typically expressed that way in our day and age. You'll see even very well-intentioned, very sophisticated academic dressage trainers from the very beginning have the horse's pole high. I can walk into a paddock or walk into a clinic and I can spot an over-cortisoled horse from a mile away. And I can spot an under-cortisoled horse from a mile away based upon their presentation. Look at their brachiocephalicus, look at their abdominal sling, look at their low spine, look at their transversus abdominis, look at these regions of the body, and you'll be able to see if this horse has been holding themselves in an over-aroused state chronically, or if they've been holding themselves in an under-aroused state chronically. And then I speak to their owner and I go, yep, that tracks. Yep, that tracks. Often you'll see an owner who is discomfort avoidance will be standing right next to a horse with an under-cortisoled postural presentation. And someone who is addicted to going over and kind of pushing, you'll see an over-cortisoled horse standing right next to them. These things can be really, really clear once you know what to look for. And it's once you've seen it, you can't unsee it.
Unsee it. 100%.
I need to go let in my cleaners. I'm going to be back in like 2 minutes. I'm just going to press pause. You go to the bathroom or get some water and we'll be right back to continue, okay?
Easy done.
So, Charlotte, if you had to look at a horse with your eyes and to assess based on muscular, physical, postural, even emotional presentation to describe a perhaps under-cortisoled horse and an over-cortisoled horse, what might you be looking for, generally speaking?
Okay, so the first thing I probably have to say is I definitely get I can definitely see where you're coming from with when you say under cortisol and over cortisol. I'm going to throw a tiny spin on this.
Please.
And say I just definitely want to say I appreciate 100% where you're coming from when you say that, because I do get what you're saying.
But push back if there's pushback. Push back if there's pushback.
No. Both of those, I see exactly what you see. Exactly what you see. What I see is still two types of horses with high basal cortisol levels. So we're talking chronic stress, right? But how they express it looks different.
Okay.
How they hold it looks different. So we're talking high basal, but one may be more externalized, one may be more internalized. So I can see what you mean by that, where the more internalized one might look like they're hypocortialized versus ones that would be the typical crazy horses, so to speak, where you can see all those typical postural patterns where you've got, hypertrophied brachiocephalic, you've got a hypotrophied longissimus, you've got all those typical biomechanical levers and patterns going on. And yet you don't have those same things in, say, what I think you're sort of relating to, which is the hypocortisolized sort of horses. But they are equally, they're both having high basal cortisol levels, except how they process them metabolically and musculoskeletally and physiologically is just different. So, for example, in humans, this would be a really great way to sort of put this into an example. In humans, diabetes type 2, late onset, is often correlated with high stress, purely because cortisol, its proper name is glucocorticoid, sugar. Corti, outside, meaning outside of the adrenal glands is where it's produced, on the outside layer of the adrenal glands, and oid, steroid. So we've got sort of 3 bits of information in that one name there. So it's basically a sugar steroid. And its job is to fuel. It's a fuel source, basically. That's why it's a mediator and what we call a transcription factor. The steroid component of this molecule allows it to go into the cell's nucleus. So steroids can do that because steroids are lipid loving and they can pass through the lipid bilayer into the nucleus. The glucose is fuel. It's the basic component of the cellular respiration. Everything kind of gets broken down into glucose and it gets used however it needs to, and whatever's left over is either in the bloodstream or gets stored in the liver or the muscles. And so when we look at it like this, excess glucose needs to go somewhere. It can't stay in the blood. So it gets pulled into the muscles, and then you get certain, say, genetic types like quarter horses and things like that. And now we're starting to look at metabolic presentations. So now we've got sugar in the muscle. Sugar loves water. Water gets drawn into the muscle. Now we've got fluid retention, and now we've got a systemic issue which now starts to influence more hormones and hormone productions, and we have got dysfunction happening everywhere. And this starts to look like something along the lines of EPSM. And yes, these are genetic. These things have genetic contributing factors, but remember I've just said that glucocorticoids goes in and turns genes on and off. We're talking about genetics as well. That's how powerful this gorgeous little hormone is. And so it has the capacity to go in and turn genes on and off, not just in you, but in generations to come in you.
Epigenetics.
Epigenetics, exactly. So it's not nature versus nurture, it's nature and nurture working together to get the best out of that individual in that moment and for what's to come. And that is very dependent on the environment and what those adaptations need to be. And so we need something there to basically go, hey, we need to turn on a gene or turn it off to allow that to happen. Otherwise, how do we adapt? So now we've got sort of, a horse that's got all this sugar going in, all this water going in. We've got genes going on and off. And then we start to go, let's breed from that, or let's not breed from that. That's completely separate to the behavior. People are kind of very much looking at more what's going on physiologically. Oh, they've got great conformation. And they have no idea that conformation is heavily linked to the cortisol and the postures that cortisol kind of drives home. So, we've got metabolic presentations in those high basal cortisol states. And then we've also got sort of, maybe more musculoskeletal presentations, like what's quite evident to a lot of people, particularly in the biomechanical world and the therapeutic, body worker world and whatnot. And so now we're looking at tissues that are really highly acidic and underdeveloped and overdeveloped, and we've got opposing leverages going on. And then we try and counteract that with contractions and all sorts of weird and wonderful, crazy ways. And the whole time, the one thing that has consistently been missed is the emotional state of that horse, which is the pure representation of that cortisol level. Cortisol level and emotion and emotional intensity go absolutely hand in hand. They are the bestest of friends, and they will walk down they'll walk down the beach holding hands together. Whatever you have emotional intensity-wise, you will have cortisol intensity-wise. They are directly proportionate. Horses are, all social mammals, all mammals are social, they're emotional beings. But because emotions, until they're strong enough, are very unconscious, they're not heard until they're loud enough, until they're intense enough to be heard. If we're starting to pay attention to the lower intensity, then we're going to start making waves happen in the brain and the body systemically across the board, not just in that individual horse, but your relationship with that, including yourself as well. And the best way that I sort of can describe on how to do that is the difference between discomfort and distress primarily is the difference between micro expression and macro expression. If you're looking at micro expression, then you've got all the answers. Pay attention to the micro expressions, which look like eyes, ears, nose, mouth, pole height, tail, and tiny little nuances that are specific to that horse. Look for the little things. By the time you're recognizing macro expression, they're now saturated, and now we've crossed that T2 threshold. We have now a whole different ball game on. Whatever you bring to the table to facilitate change in that individual horse, human, whatever, you have to be exceptionally skilled to be loud enough to interrupt the noise, but without contributing to the cortisol.
Right.
That is a skill that very few people have. So I often say to people, if your horse is loud, do not entertain. Just
don't
leave.
entertain it. Leave it.
Don't entertain it. Go away from the paddock. Let other horses sort that out. Or wait for that horse to hopefully regulate enough, self-regulate enough to the point that you can then go in and facilitate it when they come back down under that T2 and they're engaging more MRs than GRs. That is so important. There is nothing that you're going to contribute to that brain in that moment that will actually enhance and help and support. It is saturated. Even human to human, you have to be so skilled as a team leader. Most people aren't. They don't have the mentality that they're going in to build a team relationship. They're going in saying they're so focused on result, and what they do is to the horse, not for the horse. And that changes everything. It changes the entire conversation you're going to have. If I go in and let's say you and I, Lockie, say you are an established part of a team and I'm the new boss, and I walk in on day one and I go, right, this is what we're doing, guys. There is no way that you're going to regard me as someone that's an appropriate leader. That's a dictator. That's not coming on board and having a we brain. That's coming on board and me having a me brain. And you're going to feel very resistant and repellent against that, and rightfully so. For me to come in and be your team leader, I have to come in going, it's not about me, it's about we. In fact, it's about you. My job is to support your processes, to help you learn to build the skills to self-regulate, to build cognitive processes around something, but not let the emotions override everything, to get those two parts of those brains working so beautifully together that you get the best out of your productivity. And when we can do that as a team, my gosh, there is just no stopping us. So for me, riding is it's such an advanced relationship skill. I dare not ever get on a horse without having a deeply established emotional, communicative, emotional connection and a deep level of you and I, as in the horse and I, both have to come to the party of willingness around understanding each other and feeling understood. We have an established openness about when we both feel uncomfortable, we know exactly what to expect from each other and how we're going to support each other, and we can co-regulate and we can look to one another and we can support each other at that time of need when we're both uncomfortable. And we can equally recognize in each other that if that is coming up to the second threshold, then we abort the mission and we come back a step. And that is okay. That's not failure. That is success. Failure is when you fail to recognize that and you push someone over the threshold, and the damage that does to relationships, I don't care what species you are, it is diabolical. It is so corrosive to relationships. If I consistently come into an interaction with you and I don't show any level of investment about wanting to understand you, you will get to a point very quickly where you go, what's the point of investing? You don't care about how I feel. And for me to consistently expect you to perform, and for me to consistently expect you to give to me and invest in me without it being reciprocal, that's just setting you up to fail. And then you're left with fear and violence or bribery. That's another one. That's a totally different podcast we need to talk about.
Or you're left with abdication. They just leave.
Yeah.
They can be physically present and just mentally somewhere else. It's like someone's playing Bob Marley in their brain and they're on a beach sipping a pina colada somewhere. They're just somewhere else. I mean, you're speaking my love language, Charlotte. This is my love language. It's like,
so cool.
It's huge once you realize these pieces and you start putting it together in training. And people who are entering into this way of working with horses from, let's say, the mainstream industrial training complex, I liken it to walking into a library after being at a loud rock concert right next to the speaker. Your ears are ringing.
Yep.
You're momentarily tone deaf. You're momentarily your senses are damaged from the loudness that you've been exposed to in regular training, because most training is very loud. Swinging ropes, tapping sticks, flapping flags, and then they talk about sensitivity. And that works if the horses are consistently going past that threshold and puncturing and perforating a layer they shouldn't perforate in their brain. When you're consistently perforating that layer in the stress part of the brain, then that part of the brain is basically inflamed. And with those inflamed horses, those inflamed brains, only loudness actually keeps you and the horse safe. And so that's when storylines around dominance and pure obedience work. It actually looks like it's working because it's true. It does work in that instance. And to actually change to something else, there's this detox period where you don't hear anything and the horse doesn't hear or sense you. And it looks a lot worse for a short period of time. People often come to clinics. I'm like, oh, did you see that? And they go, no, not at all. I didn't see that at all. And I'm like, okay, we need to be more quiet. Everyone be quiet. Listen, and it looks like nothing's happening sometimes. It looks like nothing's happening, but everything's actually happening in that place. That's where the horses live. They live in this subtle place. But I also see the flip side of that. I see that world. So people coming out of that loud place.
Yep.
And I see people coming from a place of chosen muteness. For whatever reason, they have under-aroused their horses on a regular basis through intentions such as relaxation only, comfort only, known behavior only, explicit behavioral augmentation through certain aspects of Skinnerism only. Notice I'm not saying certain keywords there just to not enrage
I love that.
certain communities.
Certain viewers.
So I see people coming from that zone only where the horse is like essentially exasperated because they're so safe. They're so safe. They're
Yep.
so safe. They're safe, and then they're wrapped in bubble wrap emotionally, and then they're put into a padded room behaviorally, and then socially with their human. There's yards and yards of distance, and the human wouldn't ever dare impose. And it's like this fear to touch, to invigorate, to create learning, to create plasticity, to induce a healthy level of cortisol. People who are so terrified because they've watched the other end of the spectrum, and so they flip
We've gone to the
flop,
other side.
they
Yeah.
zigzagged into this other place. And I meet
Yeah.
horses who are so chronically under aroused, so chronically underused,
Yes.
so chronically
Oh,
underactivated, that their bodies start to display similar, if not the same, presentations as over aroused horses. And that feeds their
yes.
flame because they go, oh my God, anything I do makes them stressed. It's like, well,
Yes.
yes, because you're actually stressing them through not challenging them. They can be equally as distressed by a lack of
Yes.
challenge as they can
Yes.
be distressed from over challenged or a threatening demeanor around horses. A lack of challenge is a threat to a horse because they're like, you've got me on the end of a rope and now you're dangling me in a fog. How long am I going to be here? What do you want from me? Who are you? Tell me what you want. I can't hear you. Can you speak up? Like, it's just, I see those horses and they have the same sort of physical decline. You'll see these
Yes.
metabolic issues in those horses, the same way you see metabolic issues in overstressed and traumatized horses. I'm saying like
Yes.
diagnosable metabolic disorders are present in these horses. You'll see
Yes.
joint breakdown in these horses. You'll see these weird, undiagnosable, almost autoimmune responses in such horses. It's like,
Right.
and like their bodies are inflamed, and it's, you look them in the
Yep.
eye and they're just dead behind the eye. They're like, someone ask me a clear question and give me something to do, please God, or just let me go back
Yes.
to the field, you know? And so from both ends of the spectrum, it can be a huge challenge, especially when in the same room, be that a clinic or be that an online coaching program, in the same room, you will have people from both ends of the spectrum standing next to each other. And I'm trying to kind of juggle both and dance
Ooh,
both worlds and kind of deliver messages from both perspectives at the same time. It can be really, really difficult. But
very challenging.
you want to speak to that a little bit?
Oh my gosh, you are so speaking my language on everything. I absolutely, hands down, hand on my heart, experience
Same.
the exact same thing. So, golly gosh,
So
yes,
the
you are
under
so right.
cortisoled, under challenged horse.
It's still high cortisol. It's just
Ah,
expressed different.
there we
And
go.
that's the thing. And that's what I
That's what
was
we're saying.
saying
That's what
before.
we're
I know
saying.
what you were saying.
Right.
Yeah,
They're
yeah. I know
understressed
exactly
and
what you were
therefore they're
pointing out.
overstressed because there's no
Yeah,
challenge present.
yeah.
Yeah. Mm.
That's because if I can break this down, the part of the brain that really is the driver for cortisol is that primal brain. It's the survival brain. It's that deep in the middle. It's where all the primal needs come from. And when those primal needs aren't met, and those primal needs are the obvious physical safety, there is food, there are, so we're talking survival. So these are not negotiables. Food, um, mates, procreation, um, physical
Friends.
safety. Yep. So physical safety. And then I actually do categorize two of these under the banner of emotional safety, which is feeling connection and feeling successful.
Mm.
Right. So these are really important. These are 5 not negotiables. These absolutely have to happen for there to be any level of like, uh, you have to tick these boxes. Okay. So, no, I'm just going to be very specific to 3 of these. So it'll be physical safety. That's obviously a no-brainer. But the 2, believe it or not, the most important of all of those things is actually feeling connection. As a social mammal, I usually break down these primal needs to the 3: physical safety, connection and success. The reason I only use those is because realistically, you need to be connected to have a mate. It's not going to happen. So, they kind of feed into each other. If you're not successful, you're not going to get your food. So it kind of actually comes down to three if you really think about it. Feeling physically safe, feeling connection, and having a sense of success. And when you don't feel, if I can reframe these into the emotional safety and physical safety, if I can just put the physical safety aside for 1 second and reframe the words under emotional safety as connection falls under feeling understood. If you feel understood, every connection is the result. There's a willingness to connect. There is an opportunity to connect, an openness to connect. It is going to be the byproduct of feeling understood. When you feel like you understand, the byproduct is feeling successful. Mm-hmm. So I often say that primal brain is looking for three things. It's looking for feeling physically safe. It's looking to feel understood, and it's looking to feel like it understands. If one or a combination of those needs are not met, there will be a breakdown of communication and there will be an elevation of cortisol. And that starts to change everything. Now, when you look at horses in general, in what you were just talking about there, where you've got a human who's providing an under-aroused environment for a horse, what we've got there is, it's so funny.
Lack of success.
Yeah, because that's your purpose.
Right.
If you can't practice your purpose, how can you practice a skill of survival?
Right. And how can you feel connected if you can't feel successful?
How can you feel connected?
To yourself.
Correct.
Or to others.
Correct. Yeah. Exactly. So it really, what it really comes down to is the absolute one that trumps all is feeling understood. That it trumps everything. It trumps I don't care about Maslow's law at this point in time because it's wrong. I call bullcrap on that because we're talking about to survive.
You have to be understood.
Especially if you have to be understood because your survival is dependent. If you and I are a team, our survival is dependent on doing it together. When we are collective, we are bodies, we are powerful, we eat together, we hunt together as a predator. That's what we do. We hunt together, we eat together, we procreate together, we keep warm together, we put our brains together and we make it happen together. This is why in prisons, as a human, being in isolation is a punishment. Seems really pleasant because you're no longer in mainstream where you're going to get your head smacked in, but realistically, after about 2 days, you start to go insane. The isolation is catastrophic to the brain. And you're stripping it of its emotional safety, but yet physically safe. You have physical safety in that cell, don't you?
Terrible.
But you don't have that emotional safety.
It's a fate worse than death. And stripping it of its ability to be successful. And if you're understood, you can be successful. And sometimes to be successful is to simply be understood. You feel successful by being understood. Right. Yeah.
And I can't say, Lockie, you're understood. That's something you have to feel.
You have to feel it.
You have to feel it. And how do I know that you're feeling it? You show it in your body. You mirror me. When you feel understood, you will mirror me. When you don't feel understood, you will show it in your micro cues. And that's why it's important to be looking at your micro cues. Horses are no different. If I say to you, Lockie, think back to every horse, any horse, could you easily point out to me when a horse feels understood?
Yeah.
Yeah. And you know what? You don't have to be trained in this because it's a feeling. You can immediately feel the alignment come into place. You can equally see when a horse doesn't understand, feels like it understands. I can't say you understand. You have to feel like you understand. I can't say you're successful. You have to feel successful.
Mm-hmm.
And what makes it worse is when you are focused on the result of success. And a lot of horse people are, they are so result driven. A lot of people are. We're in a world where it's results, 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 that we don't take care of the process. And the process is all about shifting the focus from the result to how do you feel throughout the process. The result's going to come either way, no matter what. Like, here's an example. If I have a tarp and I would like to ask that horse, and I only ever ask, I'm always asking. I never tell. I'm very persistent with my asking because I love the discomfort zone, right? So I don't go, oh, would you like to cross that tarp? Oh, that's no worries. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying, how do you feel about crossing that tarp? How do you feel about crossing that tarp? How do you feel about crossing that
Yes,
tarp?
asking the question again and again.
And
Yes.
again and again. And giving time to process that is so important. So I've got a tarp in front of me and I've got my horse next to me. Conventional training systems would be, all right, get your horse from this side to that side. So get your horse to go from A to B. Everyone's focused on the result, get to B. And I will actually demonstrate this at a clinic. I'll say, think about this, humans. How can you get your horse from A to B? And they all do it, right? Or they don't do it, depending on what the horse does and how much time they've got. And then I go, right, we're going to reframe that. I'm going to add in a couple of words into that sentence. I'm going to say, how do you get your horse from A to B with confidence? That changes the entire dynamic, the entire thought process. Now their focus isn't on the result, it's on how that horse feels.
Mm-hmm.
And all of a sudden they've become aware of how that horse feels about the process and they start to take care of it. Mm-hmm. It's where we put the emphasis. It's the question we ask and where we put the emphasis on the question. And it's all relative to the cortisol levels. It's not a case of going, get your horse to do, it's don't do it to your horse. Do it for your horse. Help your horse learn. Don't be afraid. Those people who under-arouse their horses are afraid of discomfort as much as what the horses are. We have to basically really reinforce the skill set around sitting in discomfort.
Yes.
Start to help people learn that sitting in discomfort is not only essential for growth, it can be the most incredibly beautiful and valuable place that is out there. And the most important part of that skill set is when you're there, you don't have to justify it. The minute a human feels like they have to justify how they feel by saying, why do you feel that? And trying to intellectualize, you completely disrupt the process. There's only 3 reasons that you would feel frustration or anger or something that elevates the cortisol. And that's because you either don't feel physically safe and or you don't feel understood and or you don't understand. They're your causes for an emotional response, really. Because if you feel happy and willing, all those needs are being met. It just happens that there's a context around that, but everyone blames the context when the actual cause is primal need not being met.
It's wonderful. I'm so thrilled to hear all of this from someone else. There's not a single thing you've said that was in discordant with my experience or my own research. Not a single thing, and that's very, very rare. I am Mr. Pushback, Mr. Rebel. I'm almost always can I find something to pick up and kind of challenge someone on. But you've left no crumbs. There's nothing you've said that I haven't been in complete alignment with. And what can I say? I'm looking forward to meeting you in a few weeks in Perth.
Oh, ditto.
Charlotte, we're going to finish the pod there, but if you'll permit me, I'd love to invite you to return, potentially also for this second season, to discuss dopamine in more detail, because we haven't even talked about dopamine yet. And so I
Absolutely.
think that's a big subject that needs exploration as well. 'Cause
Oh
there's
yeah.
a lot of confusion there too. Would you like to come back?
Would love to. It would be my
Okay.
absolute honor.
Well, to finish,
Thank you so much for having me.
I'd like to ask you one question to finish. And
Sure.
I'd like you to muck out with me. What's something in the equestrian industry? We've been talking about it here and there, but if you could encapsulate one thing in the equestrian industry that makes you say, what the muck is that? Like something you want to scoop up and put to the side and compost out of the equestrian industry like it's a pile of something in the corner. What is one thing you'd like to move on?
To get rid of, is that what you mean?
Yes.
To throw in the bin. Yep. Given how prevalent certain disciplines, that like we've got lots of disciplines within the equestrian industry, and I can't see it sort of changing anytime soon. I would love to see all disciplines across the board become more horse orientated rather than for the human. If we're going to actually have that, let's make it so that it's something that's not driven for human gratification, where it's actually, if it can't be more horse, then it's at least equally horse and human driven, as like partnership driven rather than human oriented, where we're rewarding the human's so-called performance and really undervaluing the horse's input. That would probably be it.
I am with you on that one. And that issue wears many guises. It wears many costumes.
Oh.
It can look like an over focus on performance for competition. It can look like using horses as a style prompt for human self-help and spiritual development. It can look like, horse trainers who start out with the horse in mind and end up getting sucked into the human world, and the horse is a kind of a byproduct of their work with people. And I get a lot of crossed eyes at me when I say things like, no, horsemanship is not a journey inward. It's a journey to the horse. Horsemanship should be a journey to the horse, not to the self. You discover yourself in the process, but if you want to discover yourself for yourself, then do self-help, leave the horses out of it. But if you want to do horsemanship, then it is a journey to the horse. You've got to center the horse. And that's been really my reinvigorated focus this year for my work also, because it's so easy to get off track with that. So easy to get off track with that.
Yeah, absolutely. It is. Oh, I could not agree more.
Love it.
With you.
Oh my God.
Oh my goodness.
Charlotte, this has been so much fun and I'm looking forward to having you back. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been an absolute honor. Thank you.
Thank you. You've been listening to the Emotional Horsemanship podcast. That was Charlotte Moore, equestrian and neuroscientist. Wasn't she amazing? When I got off the recording with her, the minute I pressed stop to record, what I said out loud was, where the F have you been all my life? And we, had a good giggle about that. But if you'd like to connect more with Charlotte and her work, her website is in the show notes of this episode. If you'd like to learn more about emotional horsemanship, please go to emotionalhorsemanship.com. Don't forget to subscribe to this podcast and consider downloading the episodes too. Leave us a review. That would go a long way to assisting also. Thanks for being here, and I hope to see you next week.